You are listening to ProveText, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello, welcome to ProveText. I'm Michael Halcomb. I'm here with the heavy sweatered Fred Long. Yeah, man,
Yeah,
that
I'm leaning
thing
into
is
my Norwegian heritage. My mother-in-law
nice.
says the sweater's very befitting of me. It keeps me nice and warm on a 60-degree day in Wilmore. Actually, it's 62 degrees
Right.
here.
All right. Well,
Yeah?
I think it's high 70s here, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
It's kind of a gloomy day though, a little bit rainy.
Yeah.
So we are nearing the end of our Galatians study. By the way, if you're watching, listening, Fred has put together some playlists. I guess we should post those somewhere. I mean, you can go onto YouTube and find playlists, but Fred's put together some Spotify playlists, and maybe we can put those on our website or something on the podcast page for people to access. We'll see. So keep an eye out for those. But we've been doing, basically since we started this podcast a couple years ago, we've been just slowly walking through Galatians. We're in chapter 6 today. We're going to look at verses 11 and 12. And then after that, we only have 6 verses left, I think. So, if you have a New Testament and you want to get it out, now would be the time. Galatians 6:11 is where we're going to start. We're going to look at the Greek first. Then we'll discuss, and we'll also turn to 6:12. So let me screen share here with everybody. I'll pull up stepbible.org. I got the NIV up as well as the SBL Greek New Testament. So the Greek reads like this: "Idete pelikius eumin, grammasin egrapsate emecheri." Pretty short verse here, and I don't think there's anything I really need to comment on here with regard to the passage, but as far as like pronunciation or anything goes.
Yeah. Well, you got a command form, idete. So look, there's no connector. So we have a syndeton. This is indicating a break and a big section break because you have, really, this is a meta comment. Look with what large letters to you I write in my hand, with my hand. So kind of an interesting verse because you have two dative of means, which is kind of interesting. I don't know of any other example where you have two dative case usages, each of them really describing means. I mean, maybe one of them could be manner, in the manner of large handwriting, I suppose, with my hand. So anyway, two special case uses of the dative. So the pelikis actually is modifying grammasin, and they're discontinuous. So in between them is the pronoun, the indirect object, umin, to you. I write to you. So to you is separating the pelikis and the grammasin. So that's rather interesting because often the discontinuous constituents with words that belong together, usually it's the verb that they're on one side or the other of the verb. But here, this pronoun is breaking them up. And I don't really quite understand why. Why is that need to be breaking that up? I don't know why. What it does, what's affected here though, is it does put in a front position the largeness. Pelikius is a correlative pronoun for largeness. It construes size. It's marked for size. And so there is a stress on the size of his letters. So we could wonder why that is. And then you have igrapsa te eme kiri, my own with my own hand. My own is the emos. It's the eme. It's a possessive adjective from emos. It's in agreement with keri, which is feminine dative singular. So that's that pronoun emos, eme, amon, is marked more intimate ownership. And you can see that this is pretty intimate ownership. It's his own hand. So in other words, he doesn't use mu or emu. He uses this possessive adjective or the possessive pronoun here. And I think that's stressing his particular ownership here. All of this is a meta comment. So really two levels of meta comment. So a meta comment is when the author becomes self-reflective of the communicative act. And in this case, there's two levels of this. First of all, there's the Paul's call for them to see, look. So there's actually, this letter would have been read aloud. And so at this point, maybe the person who was reading the letter could, turn the letter around and they could actually see that the print was different right here because Paul is writing. So it's really calling the audience to perceive something, to look at something. So in that regard, that's a meta comment of receiving the discourse as something that could be seen. And then also the Paul is self-reflective himself. So the second level of the meta comment is, I'm writing to you with my own hand right now with these large letters. So Michael, I don't know what your view is on what's happening here. My understanding is that Paul has been using an amanuensis, which is a secretary. And at this point, as we have examples of in antiquity, the hand changes at the end to give the signature.
Yeah, I probably would agree with that. Yeah, I have no problems with that theory. If it came to light that Paul were writing the entire time, and this is just an emphatic closeout, then I have no problem with that either. So it's I have no problem that Paul might be writing the whole letter.
And just chose at the end to get real big handed.
It's a way of it's just a way of emphatically, like, it doesn't maybe it's not just referring to the large letters at the end, but the large letters all the way throughout, writing in scriptio continua with what is it, uncials or majuscules or whatever, like the capital letters, all the way throughout. So that's a possibility too. It doesn't matter to me, although in Galatians 1:1, Paul does open by saying Paul an apostle, and then in Galatians 1:2, he says also all the brothers, all the siblings with me. So he doesn't indicate here that somebody else is writing, but this may be a clue that they are, although I'm not going to make a big deal of this. What I did say earlier about pronunciation, I didn't have much to say, but I switched screens here, so I pulled up the Center for New Testament Restoration, Alan Bunning's site, and interestingly, you can see with P46, the you mean here is spelled with an epsilon iota, which tells us that epsilon iota, that vowel pair, sounded the same exact way as just the iota itself. Yeah. So, this is a great example of where we have proof that epsilon iota and iota made the same exact sound at this point. Now, I was thinking too, in modern Greek, if you read this out loud, it sounds very different than it would sound in Kine. So let me backtrack for just a second. If you were to read this, right, remember that in modern Greek, etas are pronounced as iotas. Omicron iota vowel pair is pronounced as iota. Upsilon is pronounced as iota. Everything is like iticized or ioticized. So in Koine or in Kune, it sounds something like idete pelicius umin grammasin egrapsate eme chiri. In modern Greek, it would sound idete pilikis imin grammasin egrapsa ti emi chiri. And it's just like
Mhm.
all the way through.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is interesting too. Just to look at some of the manuscript evidence, um, you you know that we have here. Um, I find it interesting because on Allen's sort of statistical grading, he gives every word 100% likelihood except pelicius, which there's just a blank there. But every witness up to 424, the main witnesses have it or a form of it. So
Well,
I don't know.
I think the other form is elikos, not pelikos.
Ah, yeah, I see.
So that's the reason.
Pelicius.
So pelikos and elikos, they both have to do with size. So there is a P that is possibly at issue there. Yeah. I think it's kind of neat to see what he's done too with that, where the umines, um,
Yeah.
some of them are represented by a dash or a slash, an upward slash, rather than writing out the new at the end of a
Yeah.
line. They would put basically a dash,
Overbar. An
and
overbar.
yeah, and that represented the new. So that was a convention. So I like how he represents that convention uh, there in the database. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so I'll show you the actual manuscript here, which is pretty cool. So let me zoom out here. We can look. Um,
Hmm.
so you can see it right here, and actually see this the in Efeso added. That's interesting. But right above that, you see the Umi, the overbar above the iota.
Yeah, very
So you
faint, but that's
see
the over
where
bar. Yeah.
where it's you can see where it starts idete, and it's got what looks like a diaresis over it, as well as the upsilon has the diaresis over it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's interesting, right? To see Inefeso right there
Well, I wonder if that's for the
in the
next
margin.
text. That's for the next column.
Oh, so Galatians, Ephesians.
Yeah,
Um,
that's for the
I
next
see.
column. Hmm. Yeah, and that's where Ephesians begins. Yeah, Galatians
Oh
and
yeah, great.
Ephesians. Hmm. Hmm. Yep, that's fantastic to see all that. Yeah.
Look
So
in this too. The list. That's pretty cool. Check this out. Um, the list here of things before it's actually listed. Each word put on its own line.
yeah,
I want to make a point here before we go on. So people often talk about in scriptio continua there's no punctuation, which is not
yeah,
true.
it's not true.
There is punctuation. I'll just show you a few here. One thing you can see, uh, even if we just look at the verse we were just at, look above it. You have a whole blank line. So you have
Hmm.
have that, and then you have the offsetting
Indenting.
indent. Yeah,
Yep.
right there with idete. So you do have that. The over bars are a form of punctuation a lot of times, in that they'll signal the end of a word. Not always
Yep.
the end of a word, but a lot of
Yep.
times. And then, the listing technique is also a form of punctuating.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I
Uh,
didn't know that I really like lists. I didn't know that they did that. So this is Sinaiticus, right?
P46 or
No, it's not P46.
P64? No, not.
No, it's
Sorry,
not.
that's what I clicked. You're right. Yeah, I think you're right. It's either Vaticanus or Sinaiticus.
Well,
I
it's
don't know
got the
which
four
one it is.
columns. I forget which one. I should know which one has the four columns. Uh,
Uh,
does it say?
Let me see here. Doesn't
But yeah,
tell
that's not a
us.
papyri. That's one of those.
I clicked P46 though. Why didn't it give me that? For those of you who are listening, we're just this is on the fly. So
Yeah,
um,
it's Sinaiticus that has four columns. So yeah, we're looking at that's Sinaiticus, which dates around 320, 320s. So it's very early, but yeah, there is some punctuation, some gapping spacing, but the papyri would be, we see a lot less of that for sure. You have a lot less, but you do have some things. I don't know if you have the indenting.
here we
We'd have
go.
to look at
Here you
each
go.
one. Yeah, there's
The
P
papyrus, right?
40. There's P46.
Yeah.
And
Um,
you do have some spacing between words. So it's not a
yes.
pure continuous script because you can see that there's some gapping between words. And there's
Hmm.
always choices of line wrapping and where to wrap, and that's often around a word. So it's just not quite
Here,
true to say that there's no.
here is I don't. Can you see the arrow on the screen? I can't. I don't know if you
Yes, I
can.
can. Yeah.
Um, so it says right here is the idete, and
Either
notice you
that.
have the eresis again over the iota, and then here's the edicus, um, or edicus, right, with the lunar sigma, and then here's our mean with the epsilon iota nu.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have idete, edicus, mean, grammasin, egrapsa, right? So it's pretty cool to see. Um, Pretty cool to see this.
Te
So,
ime keri.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
Te me keri. Yep.
Yep.
Osu ethnis.
I enjoy
Very good.
teaching textual criticism. Yeah, I teach that class every about 4 years to 3 years. Had some great classes in the past. Haven't had as many sign up, so then I've had to do an independent study with that. But Al and I were just talking about that. Um, well, um, so let's do one more verse 12, right?
Should we talk about real quick before we move on? Paul is saying, he writes with big letters and his hand, and a lot of people have taken this to imply that he has some sort of sight
Mm-hmm.
ailment, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an interesting theory. I mean, you also have in Galatians 3:1, he says like I would have pulled out my eyes and given them to you. Um, and then there are other places where he talks about. So uh, Kenneth Birding has in his book, I think it's titled "The Paul's Thorn in the Flesh" or something like that. He's argued that some sort of quote angel of Satan had cast a spell on Paul
Mm-hmm.
that affected his eyesight, and then he gives a specific modern name of the specific malady.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I'm a little more reticent to. I can roll with the idea that Paul had eyesight issues, but I personally don't connect the eyesight issues to the thorn in the flesh. I think those are two separate things. Um, I think the thorn in the personally, and I'd be curious to hear what you think, Fred. But I personally think the thorn in the flesh is the constant uh, questioning of the Paul's status as an apostle, the constant challenge to that posed by his uh, enemies, so to speak. And this, especially you're familiar with Second Corinthians very well. In Second Corinthians, he's dealing with a lot of that. First Corinthians as well. Really, his whole ministry, everybody's questioning his status as an apostle. And anyways, that's
Yeah.
my own thinking that it's the people questioning him or that the thorn in his flesh.
Yeah. Well, I think that links to the context of Second Corinthians in many ways. There are other issues that are going on. I I I think the angel or a messenger of Satan, it seems to be a rather acute kind of thing. The thorn.
Mm.
I am doing a book review of that book. I've not completed it yet for a journal. He's
Huh.
arguing that this thorns, it's almost like voodoo, that they would take a
Right.
thorn or
Right.
needles, and that he's being poked and prodded in some way, and so he's being attacked magically in some sense. So I'm still evaluating that.
Yeah.
The eyesight issue, I don't buy.
Yeah.
I don't buy that, particularly because people want to link the eyesight issue to the weakness of the flesh, which we talked about earlier in
Mm.
chapter 4. And I don't think that's what that verse is about. The weakness of the flesh simply has to do
Right.
with the difficulty the flesh has meeting up with the law or God's instruction to obey it and follow it. That's the weakness of the flesh. And actually, someone has just written an article, I think, arguing that's how it's kind of understood in intertestamental Judaism, is that the flesh does have weaknesses like that. So there's an infirmity, in other words, that we're not able to be fully obedient. So yeah, I'm suspicious of the thesis that he's got an eye issue. Yeah, in
Mm.
terms of Second
Yeah.
Corinthians, maybe there's I think you could say that, yeah, this thorn, when you're talking about a thorn and some kind of something to do with Satan or the evil one, that, yeah, that's probably some kind of magical spell. But to say that that has to do specifically with the eye, I think that's although the author says this is predominantly what's being targeted. um yeah, I guess the word is still, I'm still trying to evaluate that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I'll be
intriguing.
interested to hear your conclusions
Final
on that.
assessment.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, well, let's look at verse 12. I'm gonna just leave the CNTR site up, I think. Um,
I did want to point people to a work. If you want to see a letter that ends with a different hand at the end, look at Adolf Deisman's book, "Light from the Ancient East," page figure
yeah.
21, page 161. He has these letters, and you can see at the end there's a different hand picked up. So I think that's what's going on here. So that's where maybe Michael and I will disagree. I think he's
Oh,
saying
I don't
I'm the
disagree.
writer.
I'm open to that. I just don't. If he were writing the letter, I don't have any problem with that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's one thing for somebody else to have done that in the ancient world, but I don't know that that's proof that Paul's doing that here. But if he were, then I'm okay with that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also okay with him writing the whole letter. So
Mm-hmm.
either way, either way.
Writing out. Okay.
Um, yeah. Well, let's look at the next verse here. Um, and what I'm reading is the line down where it says SR. So I'll just bring that kind of to the top now. But so it says Osiu thelusin ev prosopese. That's an interesting word. Ev prosopese in sarki. So Osiu thelusin ev prosopese in sarki. Utsiu anankazusin yumas peritemneste monon ina to stavrotu Christu Iesu me diokonde. This is a challenging verse for me to read. Um, Interesting to see that at the end, where the may the ina may picks up, everything is 50% or less, um, in terms of the statistical restoration. But
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
So how many want to make a good showing or to have their face well in the flesh? These ones are forcing you to be circumcised only in order that they would not be persecuted because of the cross of Christ, because of the cross of Christ. Yeah, this is to open up. This is a syndeton, which means there's a syndeton here. There's no connector. It indicates disjunction. There's a bit of a break here. Moreover, the construction that's used here when you have a os e is that's a relative pronoun that is marked for quantity, as many as or how many as. And then, so you have a fronting or a framing of this sentence with this os e clause. And then you have the referent to those relative pronoun people picked up again in the pronoun uti. Uti is these ones. So this is a pronominal trace, and this is what's called a left dislocated topic. This is a left dislocated topic, which means that it's fronted by way of referencing an agent or participant, and then after that initial clause, you have a pronominal trace that refers back to that group. So in my Koine Greek grammar, I've got a discrete section where I look at left dislocated topics and frames. And what I discovered is that they mark discontinuity, immediate discontinuity, but plus continuity with the larger discourse. So this is consistent with a syndeton. You have no conjunction, you have a break, plus you have a left dislocated topic, which is a bit jarring. So it's introducing these people into the discourse topic. Verse 11 had the Galatians in view. They're the ones who are supposed to be seeing or understanding. Then you had Paul writing. And then now you have a shift to a they and a particular group of they who want to look good in the flesh. And this word, they want to look good, thelusine, takes an infinitive to complete its meaning. Evpros opese, empros opese is interesting. It's ev means good or well, and prosopeo has the word prosopon in it, which is face. So these are good face people. They want to look, they want to put on a good face in the flesh. But these ones are forcing you to be circumcised in order that only or solely for the purpose that they would not be persecuted because of the cross of Christ. And wow, that is a really interesting construction there, because the monon ina, so I've never seen that before. So it's a purpose clause with a monon. And the monon is a type of specification of singularity. And it's really kind of zeroing in on what's the goal. Why are they doing this? What are they really after? They're trying to prevent from being persecuted because of the cross of Christ. Yeah. So here we're getting to kind of the core controversy. Who are these agitators back in chapter 1? And then in chapter 4, who are these people who want to cut you off from the church, from me? And here we have a clear statement that there's been some social pressure on them, and they're trying to avoid being persecuted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I still think it's the men from Jacob or James, in my own opinion.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if this is too tangential again, but just looking at the text critical stuff up in the first section here, I find it really fascinating. Just once again, in terms of pronunciation, if you look at the peritemniste, check it out. In P46, we have the alpha iota ending, and then we have an epsilon in the next one, and then alpha iota and epsilon. Alpha iota, there's a great alternation there, which tells us that alpha iota and epsilon sounded the same, at least at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And So majority of the textual variants that we have, and probably a large majority, are pronunciation issues.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's
Yes.
huge to understand that.
Yes.
And then the other
Yes.
ones are due to information structure. And here I was talking to Alan about that, and it was kind of news to him. So hopefully, maybe we can have a follow up, and he could spit out data to help support that. But yeah, he was intrigued by my thesis there. But yeah, you were the one who got me on the pronunciation
I,
thing, and said, again, we're probably repeating ourselves a little bit, but what if Bart Ehrman had learned Koine error pronunciation? He
yes.
may not have been
Exactly.
scandalized by how much
Yeah.
of the variants there are, because a large
Right.
majority is simply pronunciation issues.
That
Huge.
alone,
Yeah,
right there is
yeah,
enough for me to
yeah,
argue
yeah.
aggressively that we need to teach the right pronunciation. You know,
Exactly.
just
Yeah,
look at Bart Ehrman. Yeah.
yeah. That's a great,
Um,
great example. I always am indebted to you for that. What a great insight. Yeah, huge.
look too at I find it interesting. You look at of course Yesu is abbreviated here with the overbar. It often happens with the divine name, right? And then you have Christou. But what I find interesting is how Stavro is
Mhm.
abbreviated too. In two of these instances, P46, it's got
Yeah,
the overbar.
yeah,
So that's fascinating. Why?
yeah.
What's your insight on that? Why is Stavro?
Well, I've just been
Uh,
lecturing on textual criticism in both my exegesis class on Galatians, and then also my New Testament research methods class. We just were covering this, so this is really fresh in my mind. We don't know really what motivates the use of the nomine sacra. I think there is a sense of trying to hide who the main actors are. In other words, I think it's to be protective of the content, so that they aren't, if these manuscripts aren't found, that people aren't quickly and easily identified as followers of Christ and be killed.
really?
Yeah. So I suspect there's social political reasons to do this. Um, the
Not just
alternative,
the idea that sorry, I was gonna say not just the idea that it saves space on the page and saves ink. You know,
that'd be the
it's
next option,
cool.
but I don't know how much space it really does save, but a little bit, particularly because those names occur a lot. But I also am intrigued that the main figures, the main names that would give Christians away, and here to see that the cross is also being hidden, would suggest to me that there's maybe something else going on. These are identifiers that would betray Christian identity, and maybe cause the manuscripts to be destroyed. So maybe it's not so much we're afraid of our own lives, but we just don't want our manuscripts destroyed. And we're trying to
Hmm.
preserve them. So it's not they're doing it out of our own fear, but to preserve them.
So
Don't know.
something else I just noticed. It's fascinating because in 611 we saw where epsilon iota val pair equals iota. Here we see where alpha iota val pair equals epsilon. But we
Mhm.
also see here, and I just noticed where omicron and omega are interchangeable.
Yep.
See that
Yeah.
in uh, the
Yeah.
Oconde? Um,
Uh-huh.
you have the omicrons and omegas
Yeah.
interchanging. Just these two verses alone, we're seeing some really great examples of pronunciation. And
Three.
this site is perfect. This site is perfect for showing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to keep showing this to students. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And well, that's great. Yeah, excellent. Thank you for. I love seeing the lunar sigma too. That's always kind of fun to point out.
yeah,
The C,
yeah,
it looks like a C, but it's a sigma. Yeah,
yeah. I kind of wish we would have
just
stuck with
teach.
the uppercase letters
Yeah,
and I don't know. It's just my opinion, but
Yeah,
um, and students need to learn to read both. But, well, yeah, good stuff. Let's stop there, Fred. You got a parting shot?
I do. It is better to be alone with God. His friendship will not fail me, nor his counsel, nor his love. In his strength, I will dare and dare and dare until I die. So, presumably, that's from Joan of Arc, a statement that
All
she
right.
made.
Interesting. Well, thank you all for tuning in, whether you're watching or listening. If you would, subscribe to our channels on Spotify and on YouTube, and share our stuff. Help us get the word out. If you have ideas for episodes, get in touch with us. If you have questions, um, remark on Facebook or on Spotify or email us. We'd love to hear from you. We're almost done with the series on Galatians. So thanks for hanging in there with us. And yeah, we appreciate you. We'll stop there and say we hope that helps.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.